Welcome, everyone, to the Mindful Moments podcast. For those of you who are new, welcome. And for those who are tuning back in, it's lovely to have you back. So, the Mindful Moments podcast are an opportunity for us to kind of connect with the community, connect with our community, and share all the amazing things that people are doing and show the different ways that mindfulness can show up in our lives. So today we are joined by Rose Whitney. She is a youth worker and a primary teacher. And Rose has been in education for almost 10 years, working at schools both here in Bangkok and in the UK, where she's based now. And now she's moved into youth work. She is a big fan of dogs, and to quote her, she's terrible at writing introductions for herself. So before we start, I just want to say that Rose is like such a dear friend, and she's just a phenomenal human. She's also been a really key member of Mindful Sparks for the past kind of 3 years, helping us develop our teacher training workshops, curricula, after school activities. She's an absolute gem of a human, and I'm so excited that you'll get to kind of connect with her today and, get a bit of insight into her relationship with mindfulness. So thanks for joining us today, Rose. I'm really looking forward to our chat today.
Thank you so much for having me. Very kind. Your introduction's lovely.
So let's start at the beginning. Like, when did you first become aware of mindfulness? What did that look like? And how did that show up in your life?
Yeah, so I think about 12 years ago now was my first interaction with it through a yoga class. I went to with my mom actually. And it was quite a difficult period in my life, and when I was sort of going to classes a bit more regularly, I found that the movement and the kind of meditation elements of it gave me space sort of mentally and let me kind of have an escape almost, like a break from my own head for the time, which was difficult. Um, and there was like a short period of time there where it was just like a peaceful, remedial kind of practice. Um, but I quickly lost sight of that. And it became, as I really got into yoga, and I think a lot of people experience this, and it's kind of there are pockets in the community that are really like this. It became a competitive thing and like a performative thing, and I sort of used it as a thing to judge myself and to keep pushing to perform more and do more. And it's like, I'm gonna get a leg behind my head. And then once you've done that, it's now I need to get two legs behind my head. And it just doesn't really end. Um, that kind of ebbed away after a little bit, but in terms of meditating, um, again, I was kind of sporadically doing it. Some of the classes that I went to had meditation in them. But I was really reluctant because I found it so hard.
Mm.
So I think that took me longer to get into.
Mm.
So it became less physical, I suppose, over time. But yeah, yoga was my first sort of introduction to
That's
it.
cool. And has it changed over time? Like, is yoga still kind of like the, the bridge to get you into like more mindfulness practices, or does it look different in your life now?
Yeah, it's so different actually. And I think with a couple of things, so I've picked up other practices, kind of, I got really into meditation for a time, after sort of pushing through that really difficult beginning bit when you're a beginner really and you're getting to know something. And I managed to build up enough practice to get into a really good routine, and I became incredibly disciplined with it for about a year. I think I meditated every day for a year. But then again, that kind of tracking and judging really overtook the
Mm.
practice itself. Obviously, I still had the benefits from the practice, but it became like a rigid thing. And when I remember having that year streak because I used an app, and I think the apps are great. I think they're really, really helpful support because sitting in silence is really hard for like most people. But it can be hard to maintain the balance between engaging in the practice in a sort of wellness perspective versus, oh, I want to keep my streak
Mm.
going. And I remember when I broke that streak and I was like devastated. And I kind of found it hard to like then bounce back, and there was a lot of like really negative feelings involved in having broken that. And I found myself sort of looking back and going, oh, it was so much better when I was doing that every day. You know, why can't I do that? And a lot of like shame crept in, really. Um, so I think in terms of like how it's changed over time, I definitely think more flexible is probably the biggest part of it, because I think discipline and doing stuff every day like that really works for some people. Like my dad is one of those people, 100%. He's on that Duolingo app. He's on his over 1,000th day in a row. And it really works for some people. But what I've found is I can get twisted into a bit of a knot. I can do it, but it ends up becoming like a punishing thing over time. So for me at the minute, and I'm sure, you know, elements will, it shifts over time so much, doesn't it? But at the minute, it's about trying to find ways to incorporate it into my day and like my life that are more flexible and more broad and more genuine. So not just sort of like doing it to tick a box. You know, I've completed this many of these programs, sort of thing. Um, and looking at how it can fit my life as well as the work I can do for it. Like, how can it work for me? Um, and that's been really great actually, because I think, you know, the quantity that you're able to fit in when you can be flexible like that is much more. So whereas like before, you know, yes, I was meditating for half an hour every morning, but it didn't really incorporate it into the rest of my day. Whereas now, you know, I'm driving along and I'll look at the trees. Not for too long, but or you know, I'm able to, if I'm preparing food, I'm going, oh, this is a really good opportunity to just kind of concentrate on how it feels, how it smells, you know, what it looks like, and what I'm doing to have like still get the good effects of it, but you can kind of incorporate it into things that you do all the time rather than having it in those isolated little moments. So I think it's probably, I don't know if you could say it's improved or not, and I'm trying to stay away from that sort of outlook anyway. Um, but I think it's definitely become more broader and more flexible.
Cool. And you touched on so many important points there that I think, you know, that's a whole nother conversation in itself.
Yeah.
The the performative aspect of well-being. Like you're
Mm,
saying, I use an app as well. I use Insight Timer. I think it's great. You know, there's so much access to so many different things, and you know, get to explore different types of meditation, get to go to these talks, you know, just to kind of have experiences that maybe, you know, I don't have to leave the house to go. I can just be like, oh, actually, I don't like this one. I can just turn it off, you know, without
mm,
that financial commitment or time commitment of going somewhere else. But it also does track. And when you were talking about, you know, you did that year long, you know, you meditated every day for a year. So at the beginning of the year, I'm not a big believer in like, you know, this year, here's my New Year's resolution. But I do like, you know, taking that time to kind of set in and be like, okay, what are some goals I would like to work towards this year? And one of them I actually wrote down was meditating, building up the meditation practice to consistently meditate for 30 minutes a day. And again, I found myself gotta sit down for 30 minutes, you know, gotta do this and record it on the app. And after a while, I was like, this is just becoming routine now. Like it's not
mm,
habitual, it's not enjoyable. It's like I have to brush my teeth today and I have to meditate today. And then I noticed such a resistance to it, to be like, oh, I've got like, I just want to go hang out in the garden, or I want to play with my
Mm,
cats, or I just want to read my book. And then I had a big, like, April, didn't meditate at all. Was like, nope, just, I completely had that like pushback from it. And then it was more a case of like, okay, like I need to revisit this. Like, why have I gone from like, yes, this will be a really cool goal to work towards,
mm,
to like, so rigid and so strict and so limited, like in that flexibility, to them being so averse to it. And so now I've
mm,
changed it to like, okay, 30 minutes of, being mindful, be it in the garden, be it journaling, be it
mm,
meditation, be it yoga, be it breath work, cooking. Like you're saying, it's so easy just to chat while you're making food. Like, no, I'm going to be really intentional with what I'm choosing to do right now.
mm.
And yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think that's been such a bit of a game changer of being like, it's not one thing, and it doesn't have to look one way every single day.
Yes. Yeah. And I think there's so much power in understanding how like you work with that as well. And like, my experience is going to be different to yours, and our experience is going to be different to, people listening will have a completely different experience of it. But there's so much power in observing and reflecting and adapting, and going, oh, how do I make this work for me, honestly? So I think a lot of, our kind of culture is really geared towards that kind of judgment and almost like the shallow parts of things. So like I meditate every day, which some people that really, really works. And like honestly, I think those people are awesome and they should absolutely go for it. But that became too tight for me. And
Mm.
I think understanding why that was then. So what is this sort of feeling? Where does the resistance come from? Why do I not want to do it now? Afraid of failing. I'm afraid of not looking like I'm performing as well as I should be. There's shame involved in it. I think understanding that stuff it's like unlocking something at the end of a kind of level, like you're like, I can move forward with this now because I understand better how my brain works and how I respond to these things, and all of my past and all of my habits that are pre-existing and my personality, like all of those things will impact how you encounter something and how you respond to it. And being able to rebalance and readjust and kind of reorient to that with all of that in mind, like I think that's really the only way forward, unless you're someone who discipline like that comes to you naturally, it fits with your lifestyle. Good for you. I think for most people it's really, really hard. And even understanding that, as you said, like there are these different ways to do it, and it's not just sitting in silence. And sitting in silence is really difficult for a lot of people, and having those activities where you can practice those principles whilst doing something else. So it's, if you're tight for time in the day, you kind of kill two birds with one stone. Um, but also being able to know that there are other options for it. So, there's guided meditations, there's visualizations, there's kind of like body scans. There's so many different things that you can do with it. And it's just about picking what works for you at that time, trying stuff and changing it when it stops working. And you just keep doing that. I don't think anyone ever has like a fixed, you know, unless you dedicate your life to it or you're naturally predisposed that way anyway.
No, 100% agree. 100% agree. And I think, you're talking about taking that moment to reflect, to just to be like, instead of just going, oh, this doesn't work, this is a bad idea, I'm not good at mindfulness, I shouldn't do it. But
Mm,
taking that time to look in and be like, where's that resistance coming from? Like, why is this challenging right now? Yesterday it wasn't challenging.
mm,
Yesterday I wrote like 3 pages in my journal. I was really connected to what was happening in my thoughts or in my emotions. But today I can barely write a sentence, or, if you're choosing to meditate or move, or, however you choose to kind of bring that present moment awareness in. Um, there needs to be an element, I would say, of like curiosity with that, of being
Mm,
open to asking yourself like, what's happening today? And it might be as obvious of like, I had a really late night last night. I didn't sleep well. I'm struggling to focus. But then there might be, you start kind of digging a bit deeper and you're like, oh, I've also noticed that I tend to act this way or say these words in these situations. And there's that common link between all of them. Okay? So I think,
patterns, yeah.
yeah, I think curiosity is a real big thing when it comes to mindfulness, for sure.
Massive, yeah. And I think paired with that as well, so you've got that kind of, the curiosity is kind of like the opening thing of it, and rather than going, this isn't working, bin it to the side, you kind of look into it further and it allows you to investigate. But then I think crucial to that is having compassion with what you find. Because on
Mm.
the days, and it might be 10 days in a row, it might be 10 weeks, 10 months, whatever, where you wake up and you just can't
Mm.
access it, you've got to be able to allow space for that whilst looking and understanding, okay, are there ways that I'm thinking that are holding me back, or are there things, that small things that I could do that might make this easier? Like that's all great. And I think, having that kind of intuitive response to being able to engineer your circumstances to make it better for you is great, but it can't be rooted in, I have to do this because I'm not good enough as it
Mm.
is, or it's not acceptable that I have struggled with this today. So I think you have to have that balance of like compassion, but also cultivation, being able to like build it, yes, but build it in a way that is caring and
Mm.
not punitive.
Yeah, 100%. And like, and you mentioned a couple times earlier about like sometimes that judgment were creeping and I felt it too, like, why can't I do this? I've been meditating for over 10 years. Why is it so hard today? Like I should know how to do this by now. But then being able to like zoom out and be like, well, let's look at the bigger picture, not just this moment in time, but let's look at yesterday up into, the past 24 hours,
Mm.
say, to be like, is there anything that might have influenced why it's a struggle today?
Mhm.
And trying to take that more like changing, the language you're using to be more objective, right? Instead of being like, oh, I'm terrible at this, or this isn't working, to be like, today this is harder than it was yesterday.
Mm.
Full stop. Like that's okay. That's a perfectly good sentence where it is. And then, like you're saying about the compassion, oh, I'm so stupid. Like, why can't I do this today? Like, okay, no, that's not helping. But I mean, like, okay, today was harder than it was yesterday. What can I do to support myself right now? What do I
Mm.
need in this moment that might make me kind of just feel a bit calmer or more relaxed? Or, is
Mm.
there like somebody I could reach out to and have a chat with? Or, taking that, it's very easy, isn't it? When like if somebody comes to you and says, oh, I'm really struggling with this, and you can go, oh, you can do A, B, C, D
Yeah.
right then. But when it's ourselves, we just kind of go, oh, like it's over,
Mm.
you know?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think also having an understanding that we tend to look at things in an oversimplified way. And especially, I think in this kind of culture with social media, like fast information, loads of information from all over the world. And we tend to, we'll sort of see an image and go, ah, that fits in that box. That's what that looks like. Tick, 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 sort of thing. Whereas actually, what does practice look like? Honestly, it's messy, and for a lot of people it ebbs and flows in really big ways, and I think for most people it will definitely do that over time anyway. So I think a lot of that kind of patience and self-compassion comes in from the clarity of understanding it's
Mm.
not, it's not a kind of hashtag daily meditation situation. That's not what it looks like in real life. And if anything, those days when it isn't working, and the kind of action you do to, maybe it is take a break or to reorient or to reframe things, that bit is really crucial to the whole progress kind of model and development in general. That's the hard stuff, I think, like pulling it back. It's easy when you're on a roll.
Yeah.
That year, by sort of like halfway through, it was easy. It was every day, like weekends after I'd been out the night before, I would get up and I would do it because it was easy. And I'm not saying I didn't learn during those times, but I think I've learned a lot more when it's been difficult. And I think a lot of the growth comes from that rather than when it's smooth.
100%. I think as well, like a lot of people think of, if I practice mindfulness or I am more mindful, everything will just become easier all the time.
Mm,
Life will be more this rather than, like you're saying, like the ebbs and flows. And whilst it's true, there are definitely, you can see the growth in some things. You can see growth within like a few weeks of bringing your attention to a certain reaction or a response or language that you use, and you're making that conscious decision to change it. But then there might be other times when it's like months, years have gone by, and you're like, why am I still in this pattern of behavior? Why am I still in this cycle?
mm,
Um, and like you're saying, people can get a bit kind of, oh, give up or
yeah.
whatever. But it's those moments, it's those real hard moments where those like aha moments is where the work is.
Mm,
And yes, we've been talking quite heavily about meditation, but there are so many other ways we can use
mm,
that mindfulness, that present moment awareness into our lives. And it's those moments when we can really turn the attention back in on us with a level of accountability and objectivity, compassion, non-judgment, and be like, okay, like where am I sitting in all of this? How much of this am I responsible for? How much is out of my control? How much can I, potentially change through my actions or my words or my decisions? And how much do I have to find an acceptance with that I can't, I can't change that, but I can change
yeah.
the way I engage with that,
Mm,
you know?
yeah. And I think that flexibility is absolutely key.
Mm, mm,
And one of the things, um, I think when that really kind of hit me after that year, so I'd had this year and meditated every day. I went on a silent retreat for, it was only 5 days. Um, and that really opened my eyes to how hard it is to do the pure thing.
mm.
And obviously, like retreat isn't supposed to be, and then you go off and live your life like that, or shave my head and quit my job and live in a cave and meditate every day. That's not how it's supposed to go. But there were certain things during that retreat that I think I'd kind of accepted as being integral to practice that I actually went, this doesn't work for me, actually. Like, and even just sitting as an example, I've struggled chronic pain in my back and struggled with various physiological things throughout my life. And on the retreat, they kind of said, if you feel discomfort, sit through it, meditate on it. And I meditated on the pain. But I also came out of that retreat with 2 bad knees that caused me bother for like 18 months after. So it was understanding that you don't have to take everything in. And for the bits of it that don't work, there are kind of fixes or diversions or kind of adjustments that you can do to help it suit you. And I think being able to find out what is making you stuck and sort of lean into it counterintuitively, because you think, oh no, I just got to keep doing it. And when my knees were hurting, I was like, just meditate on the pain, just keep meditating on the pain. And I couldn't meditate by like the third day because it was that sore. And I was just sitting there with my mind sort of spinning and spinning, just waiting the time out for it to finish. And, whereas if I'd have adjusted earlier, and there were chairs at the back, could have gone and sat on a chair, but my pride. And also the fact that they'd said, if you're in discomfort, meditate through it. And that was like a big moment for me in like learning you've got to take your experience and understand how you need to adjust things, and you don't have to take everything in, because not everything is going to fit every body or every mind.
100%. And I think another thing that's also really relevant with mindfulness, and when we begin to live more mindfully, we're getting curious, we're taking our attention inwards, we're beginning to understand ourselves, maybe a bit deeper or with a little bit more clarity. And a lot of conversations can also be about, like, oh, mindfulness is for, just when we're having challenging times or when we're facing conflict or, if there's a big upset in your life. And I agree, 100%, being mindful, having mindfulness practice during those tough times, of course, can alleviate some of the suffering, can definitely help, right? There's strategies we can put in place that might allow us to stay a bit more grounded during these times. But also a huge conversation that's sometimes overlooked, I think, is the celebration around mindfulness and like all these small wins. People also kind of like, and again, I think maybe there's a link with this with social media about, these quick validations and,
Yeah.
oh, I've got to have like, hundreds of thousands of likes for it to be justified or, these many followers. But when we are more mindful, when we live more mindfully, you begin to notice these small little things, like you kept your cool for a bit longer in a situation that normally triggers you, or you made a decision to support like a small local business rather than going to like a big supermarket because you've done some research on it and you can see the bigger ripple effect of what they do to the environment. Whatever that is, like you stop calling yourself stupid because you can't do something and you just say, okay, that was challenging today. What could I do better next time? And all of these moments are also like so important, right? To celebrate those moments of growth.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I was going to say something, sorry.
Right?
Give me a sec. Just brain froze. Um, oh yeah. Can I just carry on now? Is that okay?
Yeah, we'll just edit it. Just
Sorry
pause,
if that's cognitive, it's
restart,
fine.
and then cut that up.
Cut. Take 3. Um, I think being able to see as well that those actions, they're not, you don't have to do those actions necessarily first to then get the reward of it after. Like I think a lot of the time it's more pleasant and more natural when it happens organically. So you put in the work and it's less forced. It's sort of like you're seeing the fruits of the work that you've put in. So when you've been sitting, you contemplate more, you find yourself doing those things. It's not that if you want to start a mindfulness practice, you have to go away and you have to do this and this and this and behave in this way and act in that kind of way and shift your thinking to this, or in it's about you kind of you do the work and you put it in, you keep trying over time, and it comes naturally eventually.
Yeah, right.
Because it does take time, it takes so
Uh,
much time. And that's the other thing with the social media thing, like, and it's not just social media either. And by the way, I think social media is a wonderful tool when it's used well, but like everything that humans create, it's like the power to do incredible good but also incredible harm, and it seems to be like our constant battle just to work out where that balance is and how do we pull it in that direction rather than that direction. But that kind of like fast paced it does affect the way I think we look at things and the way that we understand things. So being able to see more clearly what learning looks like. And that's why it's helpful being a teacher, because that kids don't get things on the first day. And that even if they've been getting them the whole year, they might go to the next teacher and then they start struggling with stuff. Like you see that process kind of play out over their time at school. And I think it helps to have that kind of framework when you're looking at your own kind of learning journey. I hate that phrase, but it does work. It's appropriate.
100%, 100%. And that kind of leads us quite nicely to, just mindful of the time. I mean, I could chat with you. Like normally our conversation are 3 or 4 hours long. I could chat with you so much more. Um, so I was going through all the data the other day, and I found that nearly 60% of people who come to our trainings, come to our workshops, like they've heard of mindfulness, but they don't really know what it is, right? They couldn't really explain it to somebody. A lot of people say meditation,
Mm.
being present, but they couldn't really elaborate more on that. So if somebody came to you and was like, they were one of the 60%, they said, I've kind of heard
Mm.
of it, but I'm not really sure what it is. How would you explain it to them?
It's a big old beast.
It is, isn't it? Just to end
It's
up on that one.
Yeah. Oh no, it's a sticky question, but I think it's so complicated. And as with all kind of these abstract ideas, it's an idea, it's a philosophy, it's a practice, it's training, it can be a remedy, it's skills, it's a mindset. There's loads of different things it can be. But I think you learn kind of as you encounter it. So as you dip in, and maybe there will be pieces that you see that you think, oh, that I'm interested in, that kind of clicks with me on a level, or that works with me on like a logistic level in terms of fitting it into my lifestyle. And I think making it work for you as well as you working for it, because it takes work, um but you can also make it work for you in that you can use it for what you need it for. So if it needs to be something to take a break from your own head, use it for that. If you want to, develop a healthier mindset, use it for that. That year when I did the meditation, I had a really challenging class that year, and it was almost like a self-care thing, like a preventative measure to help me manage that stress at that time. So I think being able to look at it and look at what do you need from it? What do you want from it? And having obviously a reasonable expectation both of yourself and of the practice. And it's a balancing act the whole time, but it will make things a little bit better. Not perfect. It won't solve problems. You don't turn into a superhero, develop X-Men powers. I was disappointed to see. But you better equipped for the kind of stresses of life, and you have a nicer time. I think your life experience is just a little bit sunnier, and it kind of bleeds out into people you work with, like your loved ones at home, your own interests and hobbies that you have, and your relationship with yourself, and on a bigger level in a society. Like I think that's what we want,
Mm.
really, is kind, mindful people. And it's remedial in that way, I think, especially at the minute where things are hard. It's hard. Life is really difficult. And, unless you're one of the very, very few people who just sort of breeze through the entire time, because even if you're finding it easy now, things change. And it will help that. It's like training in the gym sort of thing, like if life was an obstacle course, you're going to be better equipped to deal with it if you're training your body. And I think life is a kind of mental obstacle course, not all the time, but it can be really challenging. So training yourself in that way can help you deal with it. But crucially, it does just make life a bit nicer. And I think if you're struggling to find motivation in terms of like the discipline, do it for that. Do it for your own kind of joy and your own, you get to the end of the day and you just feel a bit better. So I think a lot of people don't,
Mm.
at least some of the time.
Mm.
And if it can help you and it can help other people, and it can help us just do things in a better way,
Mm.
then it's worth it. It is worth the graft.
Yeah.
As long as the graft isn't punishing yourself, then it is worth it, I think.
100% agree. It's such a it's such a hard question to answer without just giving, like quite an abstract sentence or,
Mm,
a very overarching statement, because it is, like you're saying, it's a practice, it's a habit, it's a state. Sometimes it's very quiet and still, and sometimes when we're being a bit, we need to move, we need to be around people, we need to engage in different ways. And yeah, like you said, what worked for me yesterday might not resonate with me today. So like the other day, I was getting back into my meditation practice, and I just couldn't. My head was all over the place, and my body was just like, this isn't, like, we've got to move. There's just frustration and annoyance in my body, and sitting here isn't actually helping right now. And I'm sure, there are many people that would argue again, meditate on that, meditate, take your attention to that. And I agree, sometimes that's what you need to do, but I just needed to move. And I spent like an hour in the garden, gardening and fixing things, and I just felt so much more at ease, so much
mm,
happier. I felt like I was back at my baseline, like, and the rest of the day was just, like you're saying, just happier. It was just, I was more content. And I think had I had sat and really tried to fight that morning, I'm sure that would have rippled out into the day. That underlying frustration would have continued in interactions with other people, you know, making my lunch, whatever it is. So yeah, sorry, folks, we don't have a clear
mm.
cut answer for you.
No. But
Oh,
I think you're absolutely right. And like being able to have that intuition as well, that's what allows you to kind of mold it into something that works. And I think that developing that relationship with yourself, that understanding of yourself, it's listening, you know, what would actually be really good for me right now. That's such a good practice to have, even if it is, I'm gonna put my music on really, really loud, gonna dance around my living room, or I'm gonna have pizza for tea tonight. I am gonna eat a whole tub of ice cream because it feels good. If it doesn't feel good, then I'm gonna stop. That's the rule. But having that intuition, developing that over time, just helps you take better care of yourself, and it
100%.
helps you make it work for you. And you can grow with it, and then that's how you make your progress over time. I think for me, anyway.
100%. Oh, I could chat with you for hours, always could. But we're going to end this one here. But, hopefully we can come back and revisit some other things that were brought up and things we didn't even get a chance to chat about,
Oh, I
because
love that. Yeah.
it's such a cool conversation. And the whole point of these podcasts is an opportunity just for people to hear everybody's experiences
Mm,
with
mm,
mindfulness, professional, personally, in all capacities. And you brought so much honesty with that, of being,
mm,
like, this is, sometimes it's great and sometimes it's really messy, and that's okay, and I'm okay with that. So thank
mm.
you so
I think I'm
much.
kind of like, I want, I wish I'd have heard that when I was starting out. I wish
So,
there was more conversation around that.
yeah.
And I think that's maybe where there's a bit of a lacking in terms of like the dialogue and the culture around it. So I'm
Mm-mm.
glad. And thank you so much for having me. It's been so lovely chatting to you as always.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, and we will be in touch soon, I'm sure.